Welcome, everybody, to our program. This is David Nevins on behalf of Citybiz List. And our guest today is Scott Evensen. And Scott is president of the board of the Highlands School in Harford County, Maryland. Welcome to our program, Scott.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Scott, it strikes me that a lot of people don't necessarily know what the Highlands School is all about. And it remains, although I know, we're all working on fixing it, it remains one of Harford County's perhaps best kept secrets. So this program and other things, we're trying to change that a bit. So I know you are the president of the board and as passionate an advocate for the work of the Highlands School as there is. Share with our audience a little bit about what the Highlands School is and what it does and what it's hoping to accomplish.
Certainly. You're absolutely nailed it, first of all. This is a passion of mine, but before I describe it, I'd like to describe why it's a passion. I struggled with my grandson a few years ago. I decided to be grandpa and take over homework for a while. And I realized that something was dramatically wrong when I asked him to simply sit down and do homework with me. And there was a way that he was processing the information that was different than what I was used to. And my father used lazy and unfocused on me to get me to come around. And I tried that on him, and he was not lazy and he was not unfocused. He was having difficulty interpreting the information the way it was presented to him. And so what I did was I started looking for places that might help with that. And I did not actually find the Highlands, my wife did. And what they do there is very unique. First of all, they are an EF Smart School, which I'm hoping you'll ask about, because it is an extremely important part of how you accomplish things. Executive function is what EF stands for. It's an EF Smart School, but more important, it is a school that handles kids with dyslexia, with ADHD, with dysgraphia, other learning differences that I didn't really even understand existed. I figured we all learn differently, but I didn't know that there was a processing issue and more and more children than I ever realized as I've gotten into this more. And what the Highlands did was they had programs that address these learning differences. And they have so many creative ways of opening up to the child how they learn. But what's equally important is it creates an environment where all of them they're not being singled out for their differences. They're being united for what they have in similarities and the intelligence that they have. And the Highlands helps bring that out of them.
Scott, that's so well put. As I've come to learn a little bit more about the school, this is not a school for kids with behavioral issues or troublemakers. It's I think probably more and more of our audience, they're more and more familiar with, as you put it, what are called language-based learning disabilities, and that's what the Highlands School, as I understand it, really has performed miracles with these children whose parents inquire at the school or take them there, really out of a great sense of frustration because they're smart kids, but who are otherwise not able to thrive in a more traditional learning environment, at least not until they've been taught at the Highlands School for a couple of years, and then correct me if I'm wrong, many of them then go back into a more traditional school environment.
Actually, there's a lot in what you just said, but what I'll tell you is that from a parent, and I was actually a grandparent playing a parental role because I wanted it. And I thought I could get him. I thought it was just a question of not being able to do homework. But I will tell you, before I found the Highlands, I actually, the public schools make an attempt to address these students. They make an attempt to help them, and it's an honest attempt. But it's misguided, because what I found was, in being singled out of his regular classes, my grandson was thereby labeled as not regular, and in public school. So in the Highlands, there's none of those tags. Now, if you're labeled as not regular in a public school, sometimes that can lead to a behavioral issue, but it's not no different than any other child would have a behavioral issue if they're marginalized or made fun of. What the Highlands does is it creates an atmosphere where they're no longer marginalized. They're actually appreciated for the intelligence that they have, and they're simply taught how to deal with their own processing issues. And what's astounding to me, and what you said, I fought through the public school, probably as a stubborn tax-paying parent, thinking, well, we've got to be able to get this to work. It took me, Josh was in fifth grade before we actually realized that somebody else's help was needed. What I'm amazed at are parents that realize it when they're young. In the first and second grade, they see these processing. I just thought it was not really like in school very much, and all the other things that normally would happen. But the parents who recognize it early, this is a transitional school. It's not designed. You don't have to go there for your entire school career. I've seen students that in 1 or 2 years gain the tools and the skills necessary to navigate their own learning differences and then plug themselves back into a regular school. What's astounding to me are parents who recognize that early on and are willing to act on it, because it took me a couple years to say, well, all right, I might be a tax-paying parent or grandparent, but my product is not coming out on the end that I want it to. And so he was the most important part. And when we found the Highlands, I don't know, if someone watches this and they have a child who's struggling, they will connect immediately. There is a level of frustration that goes on between the child and the parent, between the parents and each other, and between other children who are not struggling and the parents and the child. It creates a frustration. And the first time I got to go to an event at the Highlands and I met the families that support these students, I could not believe that I took so long to make this jump, because the support was incredible. It was nice to know there were other parents who were running into the same things. And I can only tell you, I'll give you a perfect example. I would sit for hours and do homework with Josh before the Highlands. And the next day he would come to do homework, and I would say, well, what did the teacher say about your homework yesterday? Oh, I forgot to turn it in. Well, that's an executive function thing. You do the work, but you forget to turn it in. Right. There was, after 2 years at the Highlands, I no longer had to sit and do homework with him. It was actually disappointing to me. I felt unneeded, but it was powerful to him, and it was really confidence building to him. So that's what we're all looking for as parents and grandparents, is to put the control over success in their hands. And that's what the Highlands did.
So, Scott, you did mention the term EF Smart School. So I will ask you to explain a little bit about what that might mean.
Executive function, something I didn't even know was a thing until I learned that it doesn't exist in everybody. Executive function, and I can only describe it as, and I'm not a teacher. What I am is a powerful supporter of the school. And I understand from a grandparent's perspective what executive function is and what ADHD is. So I'm not going to be clinical with you, but I will tell you that executive function is how we plan a task. And not all of us are capable of planning a task from beginning to end. And that's what was most surprising to me, is that we could be trained to plan a task from beginning to end and shown how to get started on a project. And once you are, it's amazing how much you can accomplish when you have a plan. I always thought that each of us had a different way of doing things, maybe not always identical, but it always worked out in the end. You got your project accomplished. I watched as my grandson struggled to get started on something. And then I watched as he was given the keys to getting started on something. And I didn't have to prod him every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes to do something. I didn't know he had a problem until you actually see the problem. And then I didn't know there were solutions until you actually see the solutions. And each child's different. And that's exactly what was unique about the Highlands. They met my grandson where he was, and they took him to where he needed to be. And they do the same thing with each child.
So Scott, let's switch gears just a little bit. I know I did say when we started the program, I think the Highlands School is still, obviously to some extent, unfortunately, still a well-kept secret, though clearly you've served hundreds and hundreds of students over the years. So there are, of course, many people who do indeed know about it. And I understand this conversation is taking place shortly after you all had a big fundraising, friend-raising event. I think you call it the big event. So tell us just a little bit about that. And then what is the money, assuming you raised money, what is the money there? What is it used for? Where does it go?
Actually, I'm really grateful for that question, because the big event has become first of all, one of the most enjoyable things I do every year. But it has become the largest fundraiser for the school each year. This is not a school. When parents are sitting down and looking at private schools, generally they're doing that because they're searching for a school that may give their child an edge in some area or some type of way to further their child's accomplishments. When a parent's looking for the Highlands, generally, they had every intention of their child doing well in public school. Generally, they were not set up to afford the incredibly time-consuming efforts that are needed for their child to learn. So what ends up happening is we get parents that need the Highlands. It's not a school where you say, I've got 4 schools, 5 schools to choose from. There are other schools that do what we do, but not many. And so you have very limited choices. So what happens is you have a parent that has to send a child to a private school, needs this extra help, but may not be able to afford it. So what we have is, as a board, our primary focus is to advocate for the school, tell people it exists, because I should have known about it 3 years earlier. I would have had 3 years less trouble. He would have had 3-year head start. But it's not just the advocacy, it's trying to make every dollar we can in financial aid so that there's never a parent, because that's what bothered me more than anything else in my first couple of years watching Josh, was seeing the parents that could not send their kids to this school, that could not afford it. And that basically spurred most of my involvement, was to try to see if there was a way to make certain that any parent who was faced with what we had been faced with had an option. And it wasn't one that they couldn't afford, but that people would, not only would they be willing to help them, but they understood the needs of their children and wanted to help, which is such a unique thing. So the big event funds most of our financial aid for these kids. And each year, the more we raise, the more kids we can get into the school who may not have been able to get into the school. And that puts a smile on my face every single year. And the person who runs it does an incredible job. He's been doing it for years. And Stuart Lucas is just amazing. And his team that he puts together is amazing. But what's really incredible is that parents and students and teachers all come out to this thing. It is about as family of an atmosphere as I've ever seen in a school. And I didn't create it. I just found it. But it is very real, and they are doing some remarkable things. And what's more is they're keeping families, the relief that our entire family felt after the first year was nothing short of remarkable. I don't know that I have good words for it, but it was remarkable. There was no tension. There was confidence building on the part of our grandson that was not occurring prior to that.
Scott, it's we'll have you and or Stuart back in several months to talk about the future upcoming big event. I know you just had it, but before we just get off the fundraising, because it is important to know that it's a private school. There's a fairly high. I'm sure it's reasonable, but there's a good tuition charge, and not everybody can afford it. So I understand that there is another thing you're doing to raise money for the school in the form of a stock donation program, and obviously many of us, not all of us, unfortunately, but many of us own. The stock market's been on a tear. And so many of us own stocks, for which we paid significantly less. There's a real good opportunity where everybody wins, correct me if I'm wrong, to donate some of that appreciated stock to charity. And in this case, of course, to a good cause such as the Highlands School. Can you just talk about that for a few seconds?
I would love to. This is also something that I was enlightened to because of the Highlands. I think I mentioned earlier, one of the things that really stuck in my wife and I's back of our heads was the children that could not get in. And so we started a small scholarship fund each year. And when I talked to the people who we would set it up through, he said, well, why don't you just donate appreciated stock? And I said, that's a great idea. What on earth are you talking about? And he said, well, if your stock, you've had some stocks that earned some very good money this year, rather than just give cash to the school, give them the actual stocks, let them have the value of those stocks. And it allowed us to get a tax relief from it. We gave a really nice gift. And at the same time, that gift only cost a portion of what we actually gave. It is very simple, very easy, not something that I think everyone's aware of. And it can be done on a small basis. If you have a couple of shares of stock that are nothing to gain, and you would rather not have them in a tax year, it's very simple to donate them to the school. And we have the ability now to accept those gifts without spending an arm and a leg to turn them back into cash.
So just real quickly, how does someone contact the school to learn more?
Oh, you would definitely, and this is where I am the least technologically savvy guy in the world. But if you go to highlandsschool.com or Highlands School in Harford County is what I always do, that'll get you there. I don't have, and I apologize, I don't have the website right in front of me, but that's how I always go in. I'm a Google guy, so I go in with Highlands School in Harford County, and you'll see our homepage. It's right with the kids. The smiling kids are right on the homepage. That's how I know I got the right one.
And I know you have staff there who are delighted to take calls from interested parents. And I would urge anyone who thinks they have a child who might benefit to give the school a call, set up an appointment, visit it. It's beautiful. But more importantly, it does life-altering work on behalf of your children. Scott, I couldn't imagine that the Highlands School could have a better ambassador than you. Likewise, I hope your grandson understands how lucky he is to have you as a grandfather. And we just want to thank you for your time on behalf of the Highlands School.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak about these incredible kids and their families.
This is David Nevins for Citybiz. Check out the Highlands School, and we'll see you all next time.